Gonna be showing you how to do 2024 Speed Garage Conducta Sammy Virji style. To go along with this video, you can grab this full template at the top of the description on my website. Definitely make sure to grab that. It's a really great template for making these kinds of tracks, and it'll help you get started right away making the best track of your life. Thanks for the support, everybody, and let's get going. So we're at 135 BPM, and the first thing we have up here is 2 chord stabs that kind of work together. So what's going on here is, it starts with this one made with operator. Here are the notes. It might seem really complicated. This is actually a pretty simple progression. If I show you the bass line, you can kind of see it more clearly. We're in the key of G minor. We're going D sharp major, C minor, G minor. So 6, 4, 1, right? It's a pretty simple poppy chord progression that's used a lot. And what you're going to do is you basically have that as kind of like your guiding light of like, this is our like main progression, and then you're using crazy jazzy kind of funk inversions within that. So like, for example, here this starts on, so you can see it's literally just a D sharp minor 7, right, with the 3rd up. And then these are all just created out of those same voices. Then here, or excuse me, that's a D sharp major 7, and then here we have a C minor 7, but then I've taken out the 3rd. You know, it's really not that complicated if you know what chords you're following, and then how to add, you know, 7ths and 9ths and all that kind of stuff, which is really not that hard, you know? I mean, like, if we just draw out, alright, let's just draw out a D sharp major chord right here, right? Root, 3rd, 5th. There we go. There's our D sharp major 7. Like, it's really not that hard to add in those voices, right? So, and then it's just creating a rhythm with it that's going to work really well with your drums and bass. Right? So you really actually want to probably start when you're making the track with like just this stuff. Right, and then you can build these chord stab rhythms on top. Now, for the sounds on these, this first one is made using operator. It is just some sine waves creating a bit of FM with each other. Like that, and then I have a low pass filter with a bit of an envelope, which makes it a bit plucky and a bit punchier. I got some chorus. We're high passing it, and then we're side chaining this to the kick. You really don't want a whole lot of delay or reverb with this style. And then with this one, so this one is actually in the simpler. What I've done here is it's playing that chord that should be there, that G minor. See, I made a G minor 7 here in this little operator patch, which is literally just a sine wave. That's all it is. I just made a G minor 7. But then what I've done is I've taken the 5th out, right? So you're getting this kind of like nice voiced chord. It's got a lot of melancholy to it. And then what I've done is I froze that, right? And then you can hear it's in the simpler right here. It's already frozen at the chord you want it to be. You're just going to have it play that one chord. Right, and then what we're doing is we're just jumping across different octaves, and I have those glides. And this is why we freeze it, is because if you want to glide between chords like that, that's how you do it. You get the chord as a single note, right, and then put it inside of simpler, and then the glide right there. And also something I noticed is like with this stuff, you want a really fast glide time. You know, if you put it fast, like slower, it kind of takes away from the groove. Then we just have a bit of chorus, high pass filter, and then we're side chaining to the kick. Then we got our vocal chops. So this is the same kind of deal. We have one which is like mainly playing, and then one which jumps in at the end of the pattern, right? So that one, it's basically just taking this little vocal thing, cutting it up into the individual words. You can see I also pitched it. Some of these are pitched +1, and then some of them are not. So you can see I literally had to go and like tune all of the notes. But then you get these cool rhythmic things where since you're putting it on 16th notes and 8th notes, right, it's going to be really tight on the grid and groove, but it's like you can take apart the words and like kind of reform the sentence, right? So we got that. It's going to a really fast reverb. There is reverb on this, but obviously you can hear it doesn't really ring out. It's not very atmospheric. It's more just like a quick room. And it also helps to kind of like set this apart because it's at the end of the pattern. So it's like you get the clean ones and then this hits with a bit of atmosphere, and it helps to kind of like sort of tell you that the pattern's restarting, right? So then we got this one. So this is another one where it's like just tuning them. I think in this case, I was able to just tune the whole thing to the same, like +1. Just put 1 on +1 and then hit copy value to siblings, right? So I did that, and then it's really more like syllables and like very quick cuts with this one. Then we got a bit of delay, eighth notes, and then just a side chain, and that's really it. And then the last sort of like kind of melody synth we have is this. So this is playing D. If we're in the key of G minor, this is actually the 5th. So that's kind of like something to think about when you have these long journeying chords or long journeying strings like this in like house and garage. A lot of times playing the root note doesn't even sound as good as if you play the 5th like this. Like if I put it up to the root. For whatever reason, it just kind of worked better at the 5th. Now what this sound is it's attempting to recreate a string using synthesis. The way I did this is with FM synthesis. I think that's the best when you're trying to like model live stuff like this, because you can really create a lot of imperfections and a lot of texture quickly and like just very deeply, I guess you could say it. So what's happening here is it's 3 sine waves all at the same octave. However, one is detuned literally just 1 cent. Which just, as you can hear, gives us that slight bit of detune and like movement and imperfection without being like really obviously synthetic. Like I think the more you push that up, it goes away from like a string kind of sound and it becomes more digital, right? This is about like, you know, creating what's going on with strings, which is like they have imperfections, but it's also not like super mega chorus digital like that, right? It's like just a little bit of that from like the whole group of strings together. So here's just with the first oscillator. And then you can hear how bringing in that third one really gives you a little bit more overtone and kind of helps get it closer to strings. Now another very important part, if you actually want this to sound like strings, obviously it doesn't yet, is going to be 100% wet reverb. I think that's like a really smart way to like kind of, you know, you get something like this, which is got the imperfections, but maybe it's got a bit of movement and a bit of life to it. And then you put it through the reverb. And it really helps to simulate that like kind of bowing effect. And like what essentially happens when you bow a string, which is like, you know, you're kind of creating this cluster of sound that's sort of breathing and evolving. It's not meant to sound so like straightforward as that, right? So this reverb really helps. And then just a bit of high pass and then sidechain, and that's really it. Then we got our kick. So this is like a 909 fat kick, and then you can see I've pitched it to be in tune. I've added this low pass filter, so here's without that. With it, you can hear it makes it really tight, because what we're doing is I put the filter down there, and then we have an envelope, which is really short, just jumping down. And it makes it a bit tighter and punchier, and it makes it work better in the groove too. Especially with that bass. Now the other thing here is this overdrive. Here's without it. With. It's just adding a little bit more click to the kick. This is essentially multi-band distortion. What we're doing is I'm taking just the highs, right, using the filter here, distorting them, and then we're just blending it in with the dry signal, right? And you just don't want that much of it. That's the secret, right? Like, the more you do, it is going to take away from low end, right? And then eventually you would just have the click. So a very low amount gives you the click and makes it punch through, but is not going to just take away all the low end. Then we've got the bass. Alright, so this one's really simple. If you know the chord progression we were talking about, again, D sharp, major, C minor, G minor, 6, 4, 1. I'm trying to make it seem simple to you guys because it really is simple and it's not as complex as it would seem, even though this probably seems crazy if you don't really know what you're looking at. The thing with this one is just having those root notes and then creating the rhythm, again, like around the drums. Like, I mean, in the case of this, I literally just started with the kick and bass. Right, like the whole groove comes from that, and then I brought in some drums. Right, and then you can start making stuff groove around that. But it really all comes back down to this bass line. So it's just creating grooves with that, you know, with octaves, with notes in the scale, like in this case here, this D sharp to A sharp, so that's just going up to the 5th of that chord. This is an octave. There's another octave. It's really not that complicated, right? The other thing is the swing, too. On pretty much every single clip that has 16th notes inside of this project file, there's this little logic swing, so you get the really tight, you know, steady swing across all your elements, and it gives it a really, like, together feel because everything is really, like, it is swung, and it's a little bit off the 16th note, but every single element is going to be doing that the same, so it gets a really tight feel. For the sound on this one, it's made with operator. Again, FM synthesis really is the wave for this type of music. What we're doing is it's sine waves. It's essentially like you're trying to create a bass which is like that sine wave, but with a bit more harmonic content, a bit warmer, and a bit fatter, you know, and then also a bit more punch. So it's kind of like doing everything we can inside of operator to essentially create that, right? So what we're doing here, it's a sine wave. And then you can hear I'm getting a little bit of FM from another sine wave at the same octave, so it's like not really going to change the sound that much, but it's just adding a bit more harmonics. Right? Like over here on the EQ, you can see it. When I add in that second oscillator, all of a sudden the bass is a lot more present. And that's making it fatter, too. That's going to make your mastering and your mix down go a lot smoother because it's kind of already going to be what it needs to be, right? So from there, then we move forward. There's this low pass, which we do have down a little bit because you don't want it to be like too midsy, right? And then the pitch envelope, which I did actually spend a pretty good amount of time dialing in particular having the initial all the way up, so that you can get this 2-tier pitch envelope and kind of shape it so you get the right amount of punch without it being too much, but it's also not too little, right? Because you don't really want this to be, I mean, if you want, you can make it like a kick. Right, like you wouldn't really want that. It's about keeping it so it works with the kick, but it does have a bit of punch. Then we're just side chaining that, cutting a bit of sub out as well as converting to mono so we don't get any phase issues. I did notice this referencing the tracks. I think you can get a lot louder and a lot cleaner mix if you do cut some sub out of your bass. So it helps. Then we've got our hi-hat. Right, this is that main one you hear. It's made of 2 layers. So like a nice open 909. And then more of like a punch layer, so they kind of come together. And it also helps to really make this stand out as like a loud, powerful drum right on top of the mix. We got this shaker. You can see I just drag the start time a bit. Side chain, and then also we got our same logic swing on there I was telling you about. Here's our snare, just a big fat snare. It's like it needs to be really fat, but also a little bit short too. Right? Like that's a huge waveform, but it's like not, I mean, it's like milliseconds how long that thing lasts, right? Then we've got these little snares. Right? Kind of like all our background ones, if you hear that with the hi-hat. You can see on this one I'm playing a lot with the pitches, and you can do that, and then if there's not too much of like a note in your percussion, it won't necessarily sound like the same percussion. It'll just sound like you have a bunch of different ones, but really all you're doing is just pitching it like that. You can hear it's very effective. Those have no processing. You know, the drums really aren't going to have that much until you get to this next layer. So what we're doing here is we have some loops, but they're very heavily processed. Not necessarily in terms of effects. In terms of effects, all we're doing is just side chaining and high passing. Right, on both of them, really simple. The high pass, like, they're both set the same. But what makes it a bit more complicated is the way we're working with the clip. Because what I'm doing here is, if you don't know, if you go into the Beats warp mode, first of all, on this one, you can see I actually dragged it back. So we're only taking a half note. It's not even the full loop, right? But if you go into Beats warp mode, what you can do, preserve transients. By default, it's going to be like this. Right? That's what your loop sounds like naturally, you know? Even if we like unwarp it. But what you can do is you can go in here, click this one, so now it's just playing every single one of these transients from start to finish and just like not trying to blend them. And then what you can actually do is start dragging down this number. And it's essentially a transient shaper. Now you have your like tight, punchy percussion, but it's not going to be as full and heavy, which doesn't really work that well with the garage, right? Like in garage, you want very tight, punchy drums. So you can literally take loops and turn them into that, and then just sidechain it, high pass it, and it fits way better. And then with this one, it's the same deal. So I'll turn off the effects, and I'll turn off the transient shaping. So that's the loop unwarped. Then we warp it, beats, transients, and then this setting. And then you bring down the number. I think this one I let it breathe a little more, right? And there you go. You can get some percussion and some like live elements that just aren't going to be so rigid, you know, flat, simple. But it's still the tight feel that you need for garage. So that's definitely a great way to do it. And then we just have this little effects down here. So this one's a bit of sound design as well, because it started its life as this. And I took this part. Right? And then I just pitched it up a lot, like literally 13 semitones. So you're getting that, and then we have a bit of delay, quarter notes, high pass filter, so you know you don't want this to really be in the way of anything, and then just a side chain, and it kind of becomes a whole new thing. And that's a good way to do it. Like if you want weird effects for your tracks that aren't just like, you know, the same white noise that's in every single sample pack, try grabbing sounds that might not necessarily seem like, you know, a transition effect like this. I mean, that's like some old like Star Trek, you know, Star Wars kind of like 70s sci-fi sounds, right? But then you just take a little piece of it, pitch it up a bunch, delay it, you know, kind of make it fit in the track with the filtering and sidechaining, and it can have a whole new life. So that's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. You can get this entire template at the top of the description on my website. Definitely go ahead and grab that. You get the project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything is right there, so you can follow along and make the best garage track of your life. Thanks for the support, guys. Every little bit helps, so I can keep going and keep bringing you guys new videos every single day, and I'll see you tomorrow with another one.